Yeah, I heard Spotify, they got Joe Rogan on board, and I think they're looking for someone else next. I think they're going to be knocking on your door, Norm.
I'll take 10 million. I don't need 100.
Hey there, guys and gals. This is Hayden Farrar, the producer of I Know This Guy. Welcome to part 2 of our interview with Jeff Sass. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, make sure you go back and give that a listen. Jeff goes into detail about his career, which has spanned everything from blowing up buildings to being on set with the Toxic Avenger. That's pretty darn nifty if I do say so myself, so make sure you go back and check it out. Now, for the rest of the interview.
I really want to get to this book, but let's just kind of bump people up to what you're doing now.
Okay, so currently I'm CMO for several companies. I'm CMO, Chief Marketing Officer for .club domains. .club is one of the new top level domain extensions. So an alternative to .com or .biz or .org, you can get a domain name that ends in .club, C-L-U-B. And we launched .club 6 years ago. It took 2 years and a lot of investment to get the rights to launch .club, and that's been a very exciting and fun opportunity. And we run .club from a great startup incubator we created here in Fort Lauderdale called Startups.club. Because one of the interesting things about being in the domain industry is, domain names themselves, it's not that exciting, right? What's exciting is what people do with domain names. And today, in the old days before the internet, when someone had an idea for a business, the first thing you did was you went out and printed business cards, put your name on them, CEO. Today, when you have an idea for a business, the first thing you do is you go out and get a domain name, right? You want to make sure that you lock in your place, your real estate on the internet for that business and name, and you want to get a great domain. So what's exciting about being in the domain industry business, and what's exciting for us at .club, is seeing what people do with their .club domain, seeing all these interesting, innovative startups and businesses that use a .club domain. So we've always been very entrepreneurial and entrepreneurs ourselves. The founder of .club is Colin Campbell. He's a great serial entrepreneur. The president, Michelle Van Tilburg, she's been an entrepreneur, worked for a number of startups, has a lot of experience in the domain industry. So we get genuinely excited about entrepreneurs and startups. So we decided to move our offices into a bigger space than we needed and create kind of an incubator and co-working space, which is also called Startups.club. And so we promote the .club name there too. And again, everything goes full circle, connecting the dots backwards. My background in the entertainment industry, we actually partnered with a production company, and we've been actually recording the journeys of some of the startups in Startups.club, and we're putting together a documentary series called Startups.club, right? Following their journey. So that's been a lot of fun, and again, a way for me to bring back the things that I'm interested in into the work I'm doing today. So one of the companies that was in the incubator and working out of our same office space was a pet products company. At the time, they were called Treat a Dog. And given that they're working out of our space, we got to get more and more involved in their business, just, by osmosis, being nearby. That's what's fun about a co-working space. You get to share ideas and exchange ideas, and you have the benefit of those interactions. And we started to get more and more involved in helping out the young founder of Treat a Dog. And over time, I got more involved in helping them with their marketing. And then last summer, we had the opportunity to acquire the domain paw.com. So last summer, Treat a Dog rebranded itself to paw.com, which is a great, powerful domain name. It's a great brand. It also gives the company the opportunity to go beyond just dog products. As Treat a Dog, you're pretty much stuck in the dog world. As paw.com, any pet products are valid. And so I became the CMO also of paw.com. So I'm very much involved in growing that brand and that business as well. And then I also play that role as a consultant for several other companies, where I basically am their CMO to go. And I come in and really I focus more on the big picture and the branding and the strategy, and then work closely with their internal teams who actually do the execution of that. So I'm able to be CMO or acting CMO for several other companies as well.
I know a lot of marketers, a lot of people that say that they know branding, and most are like SEO companies. They're using old technology. They don't, these guys don't keep up with the times. I got to tell you, like, I've come to you on a few occasions, probably more than what you like, asking for some advice, on, a brand or a logo or copy. And you really are a genius. You can look at it and no, I'm absolutely serious. I remember in New Orleans, I came up and I said, Jeff, just can you take a look at this and give me, your insight? For free, of course. And of course. And you took 2 seconds and you went, you might want to change this. You might want to change the wording over here. You had about, well, I know you had about 9 points, and it made a huge difference. You just knew where to hit the pipe. And I could have showed that to 100 other people. And you found it like right away. And that wasn't the first time. I've talked to you on many occasions about, just different things. So whatever you have done, whatever you have learned, I mean, it just comes naturally with you.
Well, I mean, I do think, it's good to know your strengths. It's good to know your weaknesses. And I do think, one of my strengths is I do have a good ability to quickly look at something and just, see those opportunities and see those changes. And then the other thing is, and I have a chapter in my book about this, is I learned over time to not worry about giving those ideas up. So in other words, the fact that I can come to a conclusion quickly, I'll just tell you. I'm not going to sit on it and say, well, let me think about it and get back to you. I mean, if I look at it and the answer is there to me, I want to share that answer with you. Like I don't, and I think in my career, especially when I've had opportunities to consult and advise other companies, I've always gotten that work by giving away stuff free first, by just, if I have the good idea, sharing, like Trauma. I met with Lloyd. He asked me what I thought about the trailer. I had an idea. I gave it to him. He said, oh, can I use that? I said, sure. And they used it. I didn't know I was going to end up working for them. I didn't get anything for coming up with that, but goodwill, which led to a great friendship and a great career move, ultimately. So, I like to share my ideas because the truth of the matter is ideas are, a dime a dozen. It's the execution. And I certainly, as one person, could never execute on all the so-called good ideas I might have. So if I can share an idea with you and you can run with it and it helps make your product better, then we both win. And I'm proud and I get excited when I see it in use. So even if I wasn't compensated for it, it's not always about that. It's about, sharing and helping and seeing that you made a contribution to something is to me very rewarding, whether you're compensated financially or not.
Right. And you'll see that mistake of wanting to be compensated with a lot of young entrepreneurs or people in small businesses that, feel that they have to have that little piece of the pie. And what I found is, just giving it up and sharing information
Absolutely.
gets you so much further in life. And the network that you build by sharing, I think by giving information out to people, I hate to say it, I hear this all the time, but you really do get it back 10 times because people are going to talk to other people about you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, it's if you think all of your ideas are so precious, then the chances are that very little will ever come of them unless you're capable 100% of just executing all your good ideas with no help from anyone else. Then keeping them precious and secret is, going to keep them from coming to fruition.
So I think it's time. Let's get to your book.
I think this interview is about. I think I wrote the book faster than we've
Hey,
done this interview. No,
I told you it could take up to 3 hours. All right. So tell us a bit about your book.
About 5 or so years ago, or maybe a little bit longer now, when I was a pretty active dad blogger and did a lot of so-called influencer events for brands that they were flying us dad bloggers all over. And I went to Michigan for an event for Ford. As a dad blogger. And in one of the evenings, they were going to have an Ignite event. And Ignite is kind of a fun, excuse me, kind of a fun speaking format where you have 5 minutes to give a presentation. It's supposed to be something that's inspirational, that will ignite thinking or ignite, new ideas. You have 5 minutes exactly, and you have 20 slides exactly. and the slides are programmed to change every 15 seconds. So you have no control over the slides. When they say 3, 2, 1, go, the first slide's up there, 15-second, the next slide, 15-second, the next slide. And at 5 minutes, the mic's cut off, you're done. So it's a really good challenge to come up with something that's going to be interesting, exciting, visual, because you got these 20 slides, but you got to nail it in that 5 minutes. And I was trying to think, what could I talk about? And for whatever reason, it popped into my head that, a lot of the stuff I learned when I was working for Troma, I've been applying to business today. There were a lot of really good marketing and business lessons that I learned from making these wild and crazy movies. And I thought that would be a fun 5-minute presentation because it's visual. I can use, images from the movies, and it's the Toxic Avenger. It's crazy. So I figured I'd get some laughs. So that's what I did. So I put together my Ignite presentation and I called it Everything I Know About Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger. And during the last slide, in my last 15 seconds, I ended by saying, I only have 5 minutes. I could talk about this all day. I could write a book about this, and I probably should. And that's how I ended the presentation, just kind of randomly. And I thought about that for years afterwards, thinking, I said I probably could write a book about this, and I should. And it gnawed at the back of my mind. And then eventually, about 5 years later, all the thoughts sort of came together, and I started making some notes, and I started to say, I'm going to write the book, and then I did. So that was the genesis of it. And the book itself, is a very different kind of business and marketing book, right? Because I really do. It's very anecdotal. It's very funny. It's not dry. It's not your grandfather's business book, because it's based on anecdotes of my real experiences of making these movies, but then extracting real marketing and business lessons that you can use for your business, no matter what industry you're in, based on making these crazy movies. So there's about 35 chapters. They're short. Some chapters are a page or two, so it's an easy, fun read. But pretty much every chapter has a fairly specific lesson in it that I pulled from these movies that you could apply to your business. So it's really a lot of fun. And it's the kind of book where if you're a fan of Troma movies, you'll certainly like it just for the behind the scenes Troma stories. But many of the people who've read the book and many of the 5-star reviews on Amazon I've gotten are from people who have never heard of the Toxic Avenger, who have never seen a Troma movie, and still could benefit from and appreciate how these stories shaped these lessons, and it makes it much more easy to understand those lessons. So it's a really fun and different business and marketing book, again, based on my real experiences making these wild and crazy movies, yet learning some lessons that I've been able to apply throughout my career and that you can apply to yourself in your career.
So just thinking about the lessons that you have in your book, what's one that you could sort of extract and say, all right, entrepreneurs or just for lifestyle that you could apply? What would be the number one thing?
Well, there's several that I would call number ones. So one thing that I talk a lot about is the power of we, right? And this is, I think, really important, especially for startups as you begin to grow and as your team begins to grow, right? Even though we were a rinky-dink little low-budget production company, Troma had some rules, and one of the rules is there's no I in Tromaville. Now, technically, there is the letter I in the word Tromaville, but we were not allowed to say I, and I mean that literally. We were not allowed. If you were writing a letter or an email or typing something to someone, it always had to begin with greetings from Tromaville, and it always had to say we. We want this. We want to do this. We look forward to this. And that went for everyone, whether you were the founder of the company, Lloyd Kaufman or Michael Herz, or whether you were an unpaid intern. If you were speaking on behalf of Troma, it was always we. If I was writing a note to Norm about a lunch date we had, just the two of us, I would still say, we look forward to seeing you for lunch on Tuesday. We look forward to talking to you more about Troma. We. And that was very powerful, because the truth of the matter is business, just like filmmaking, is a collaborative process. There are very few instances when you are truly a sole proprietor and everything is done yourself. Almost always, especially if you're in a startup and you've raised money from other people, you have other people who are involved, and we've all been in that meeting where someone, gets up in front of the whole company or in front of the team and says, well, I did this and I did that and I did this. And there's 5 other people in the room who helped on that project, and they're all scratching their heads, says, what about me? I was a part of that, right? And the power of we is very strong, especially when you become a manager, right? When you're managing other people, a good manager looks good not for themselves. A good manager looks good when they make their team look good. Your job as a manager is to make your team succeed. When your team succeeds, you succeed. So as a manager, using that we is very important. It should never be I. It's always we. You have your team. And even to this day, I cringe sometimes when I hear people saying I. And I still to this day feel uncomfortable if I write I in an email to someone. I tend to use we a lot more than most people because of that, training and trauma. And I think the power of we is really strong and a good lesson for you for any business, and especially if you're managing other people and growing a team. So that's one. Do you want more?
You know what? I'd love more.
So another interesting thing about filmmaking, and this is true whether you're making a low budget trauma film or whether you're making a blockbuster, Marvel film for one of the studios, and that is that filmmaking is very structured and very planned because you have to know what you're doing every day because every day has unique requirements. Every day of production of filming, you need certain actors, you need a location, you need certain sets, you need certain costumes, you need certain props, etc. So you have to plan the production on a day-to-day basis, right? And most businesses, we don't do that, right? There are very few businesses that you plan things out to that detail on a day-to-day basis. And when you plan things out on a day-to-day basis, a couple of things become true. Number one, you have to have a plan B, right, every day. Because if you're filming, let's say you're filming on location, there are things that you can't control, like the weather, right? So if you're planning to film on location one day, you must have a backup plan where there's a nearby interior location where you can film a different scene that ideally involves the same actors and actresses, because you don't want to have people sitting around waiting for rain that you might need. So you want to have an alternate scene that takes place indoors that involves the same actors and actresses so that it becomes pretty easy to move from that exterior scene to the interior scene if the weather goes bad. Sometimes, so having that detailed day-to-day planning in filmmaking is a discipline that I think many businesses lack. And we could learn a lot about that kind of structured planning from looking at the filmmaking process. Part of that too is when you're making a movie, and I learned this early on, by necessity as I became a production manager on my first film, is you must focus every day on the bare necessities, like what is really important every single day. And when you're making a movie, if you break it down, the most important thing, you need three things. Without these three things, you can't make a movie, right? You need a camera, right? You have to have a camera. No camera, no film. You have to have film in the camera, or today you have to have digital storage and battery life. You have to have a means of recording with that camera. And you have to have actors and actresses to put in front of the camera to tell your story. If you don't have those three things every single day, you can't make a movie. It doesn't matter if the director is Steven Spielberg. It doesn't matter if you have the greatest screenplay that was ever written. It doesn't matter if you have the most beautiful location on the planet. If you don't have a camera, if you don't have film, and if you don't have actors, you can't make your film. So every single day, you have to focus on those three things. How are those actors that we need going to get to the set? Do you send someone to their home or their hotel to wake them up and bring them over so that they're on time? Where's the camera truck, right? Where was the camera truck parked last night? Do we have sufficient film? Is the camera truck going to be the first thing on the set in the morning and the last thing to leave? You start to worry about those very specific things that are essential. And I think in business, we often don't do that. We're often very busy. We feel like we got a lot done, but are we actually working on the things that are really important to move your business forward? So I ask you to think about what is the equivalent in your business to the camera, the film, and the actors and actresses. Like, what are the 3 or 4 things that are actually the things that move your business forward, that are actually the things that you need to be working on every single day? And I think that's another great lesson that you can learn from the filmmaking process.
Let's talk about some of the quotes that are in the book. The first one that comes to mind is, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, so if you don't ask, you don't get. So I have a chapter about that in the book, and I think it's a lesson I was fortunate to learn early when I was working at Satori Entertainment, actually, even before Trauma. And I was a young, green production assistant, very little experience, if any, and had the chance to go on a business trip with the CEO of the company at the time. And so I think we were in London. And so we were having dinner together, just he and I at a hotel in London. I had been with the company maybe 4 or 5 months, pretty fresh out of college, didn't know what I was doing. And I asked him for a raise. Because why not? I figured I'm there with the CEO. We're one on ones. First time I kind of one on one, and I asked him for a raise, and he kind of laughed at me and said, A, you don't know shit. B, you've been here 4 months, but I'm going to give you the raise. And I said, really? I was shocked. And he goes, yeah, because you asked for it. And I'm going to tell you that if you don't ask, you don't get. So I want you to remember that. I'm giving it to you literally. You don't deserve it. You don't know anything. You haven't proven yourself yet. But I admire the fact that you asked. So I'm going to say yes. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I think that was a really good lesson to learn early on, because it's true. In other words, if you're sitting on the sideline and thinking something in your head and don't stand up and ask, you'll never know what the answer is going to be. And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Your request gets denied. They say no.
Right.
No one's going to, you're not going to physically get hurt by asking. You may throw up later because you got nerves in your stomach or something. But sometimes we keep too much in our heads, and we assume or we think through, well, if I ask for that, they'll never say yes, or if I ask them this, they'll never say yes, and so we don't ask, and you're just removing the chance of a yes if you don't ask. It's like, who is it? I don't know. Maybe I'm giving the wrong quote to the wrong person, but it was someone like Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan or some sports figure who said, you miss all the shots you don't take. Right? Or I'm paraphrasing someone, so I apologize.
Yeah,
for
that's
that.
Wayne Gretzky, I think.
Okay, so it's Wayne Gretzky. So I knew it was up there. But it's true. You don't ask, you don't get. And that's been a good lesson, and that served me well in Tromaville and in filmmaking, because when you have no money, you got to ask for things, right? When you have no money, when you have a low budget film and you want to film in someone's home, or blow up a building in Westchester that's being demolished, and all these crazy things we did in Troma movies, a lot of it boiled down to is just having the nerve to go to the authority in charge and ask. Go to the town manager in Croton-on-Hudson and say, hey, we found out through public records that you're going to be demolishing this building over there. Can we blow it up instead as part of a scene in our movie? First time when I asked that question, the city manager looked at me like I was crazy and said, what? You want to blow up a building? I said, yeah, for a movie. He said, for a movie. I said, yeah. And by the way, you can make it a training exercise for your fire department, right? Because how often do they get to put out a fire from a building that blows up? Not very often. So let's make it a controlled training exercise, and we'll film it for our movie, and everybody wins. And they said yes. You have to ask, right? You have to not be afraid to ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I think we can all use that in many aspects of our life, right? Sometimes we keep too much inside our own head. We try to think through what the answer is going to be, and we make an assumption that may or may not be correct, and we keep our mouth shut because of that assumption. So I say ask.
The second quote, this is real. I have horrible stage fright. And even this podcast it is out of my comfort zone. I'm doing it because, first of all, I love the idea. But secondly is to just do something different, get out of my comfort zone. And so this quote hits home. Don't let self-doubt stand in your way of self-improvement and gaining a new experience.
Yeah, so I have a chapter in the book that talks a little bit about that, and it really has to do with not being afraid to take a chance, not being afraid to do something that's outside of your comfort zone, as you mentioned about this, because virtually everyone was in that position. Everyone had a first time. So if you're given the opportunity to do something, and this chapter in the book is about when I had the opportunity to direct for the first time. I was sort of thrown into it, the opportunity to direct an infomercial, kind of a spoof of infomercials we did called the Tromamercial. And I had never directed before anything. Obviously I'd seen what went on the set before, and I was super nervous about it and almost wanted to say no, no, no. But when you're given that opportunity, take it, because guess what? Virtually every director of film, from Spielberg, to mention him again, to James Gunn, to anyone else, they all had a first time. There was, in every one of their careers, there was a first time they directed when they had never directed before. Everyone starts with a first time in any business, in any career, in any task. There's always that first time. So if you're given the opportunity for your first time, don't talk yourself out of it, right? Because you'll never get to a second time without a first time. You need to take that leap. You need to jump forward. You need to step out of that, so-called comfort zone and try. And almost always you'll get it done. Will it be perfect? No. Are you going to make mistakes? Yes. But that's going to make the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth and the 10th and the 50th and the 100th time that much better. But everyone started as a novice, virtually everyone. And just remember that, and don't let self-doubt stop you from taking those opportunities, because not everyone's going to work out, but some of them will. And you'll have a chance to move forward and do something and be good at something that maybe you never thought you'd be good at because you never tried before. So that's what that quote's all about.
So you mean there's a chance that I'll feel a little easier each podcast?
Yeah, I heard Spotify, they got Joe Rogan on board, and I think they're looking for someone else next. I think they're going to be knocking on your door, Norm.
I'll take 10 million. I don't need 100. So Jeff, let's talk about success. If you look back in your life, it could be family, it could be business. What is your biggest success?
Well, I don't want to get all philosophical, but I think my biggest success is just being happy. Like I'm generally, I wake up every day pretty much happy. I know there's a lot of crazy things going on in the world, but I think I have a pretty good attitude about it. I'm blessed to have a healthy family and be in a great relationship and work with people I enjoy working with and have, I'm not by any means wealthy, but I have enough. I'm not wanting anything. Um, so I'm very happy. And I think took a long time to figure that all out. And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think part of that is just getting older and wiser. But I think I'm successful because I'm happy. I know a lot of people who are far more financially successful than I am, who are not happy, who don't wake up with a smile on their face and aren't healthy and aren't, taking care of other aspects of their life. So to me, that's how I measure success. I exercise regularly. I've been meditating for 45 years. I feel I eat well. I've been a vegan for a long time, and I just feel like I'm in a good, well-rounded place that I feel good about. So that to me, that's success. Now, I've had some success in business, and I've had plenty of failures in business too. And I could argue that I'm not a success financially as to where I could or should be, perhaps, for someone my age and my skills. But that was not always the driver, right?
Right. So did you see a progression like back 30 years ago, 20 years ago? Did you have to do something to get to happiness, or were you just naturally like this?
Um, I think that I'm generally an optimist, so I would generally lean towards happy versus not happy. But I do think that earlier in my career, and certainly when my kids were younger, I was um, way too focused on work. I was the classic workaholic to the point of it being a negative impact on myself physically and my family, you know, in a real way. And I'm sorry that I did that, but I hope that I've learned from that. And so I think I've avoided, and I do avoid that. It's interesting because I should have learned. I had a good example when I was back in the film industry. I won't mention names, but there was we were doing business with a company is pretty well established and was very well known, and to this day still is. And it was a family business where the father had started it and the son was running it. And the son, who was at the time probably in his 30s, and he had a young kid. And no matter what we were doing, and we were working on some projects and stuff, and whatever we're doing, at 5 o'clock he would literally just stop and leave and go home to be with his family. And it didn't matter how stressful the situation was, and I'd be the one staying there till midnight, 1 a.m. trying to get stuff done, and scratching my head, said, how come he left? And he was so dedicated to that notion and to his family that no matter what, and we were, sometimes it was like, from a business perspective, life or death situations where, this could fail and we could lose money and this and that. It didn't matter to him. 5 o'clock, he was out the door, heading home to have dinner with his family. And I didn't learn from that, from being exposed to that lesson, and I probably should have. It was right in front of me, and I didn't treat my family at the time the way he treated his. He was out the door to go home, and I was there till midnight, trying to solve the problem that he had turned off for the day. And it was interesting. I look back on that a lot, actually. Um, at the time, I thought he was nuts, right? But he was right. I was wrong.
Yeah, this just happened recently. I called somebody and I wanted to talk to them. And then I said, hey, why couldn't I get a hold of it? Because everything's instant nowadays, right? How come I couldn't get a hold of it? Well, it's Sunday, Norm. And I was like, oh, I'm looking at the date going, oh, geez, I work 7 days a week. I kicked myself. I went, why am I calling this guy on a Sunday? Like, he's got a life. But yeah, it's so true. And have you been able to do that now? Just turn it off?
I'm better.
Yeah.
I don't know that I completely do it, but I'm definitely much, much, much better. And I think, again, it comes with age. You learn that things are rarely as bad as they seem, or as bad as you let your mind make you think they are. And most things that you think are the end of the world are not. And if you let it go, or wait a day, or put it back a few hours, it's not going to make a difference. So you can err in favor of your own mental and physical health, and the mental and physical health of your family, and things will still be there the next day.
So let's go down the other path now. So you've talked about success. What about the failures? What's been your biggest failure? What did you learn from it? How did you get out of it?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, when we were in the game industry, that the company I worked for at the time, Intracorp Entertainment, went through bankruptcy. First, Chapter 11, and eventually Chapter 7. And that, by definition, a bankruptcy is a failure, right? But that experience was really good. I mean, good to understand how that works. Good to understand, as a business person, the legal aspects, the rules and behind it, dealing with the attorneys, dealing with the courts, understanding, what it means to file for reorganization. And in fact, as I mentioned, the person who was the CEO of that company and I went on to start another company thereafter. And as we went around trying to raise money for that company being Barpoint that I mentioned, we actually did not hide the fact that the previous company went bankrupt. We actually used that bankruptcy as I won't go so far as to say a badge of honor, because it's not great. No one sets out to have their business go bankrupt. But the experience was somewhat of a badge of honor, in that it showed the potential investors that we were experienced business people. We were not looking at things with pie in the sky. That we understood that if you don't do things right, or things can go wrong, and we understood the bankruptcy process, and we actually were very upfront and open about that. And it actually became a positive and not a negative in the fundraising process, because it did demonstrate that, okay, we were not first timers. We've been around the block. We'd had businesses that succeeded, and we had businesses that failed, and that became actually, I think, a benefit to the process of raising money for Barpoint. So it was experience. Look, every experience is going to lead to more knowledge, and having that experience of a business going bankrupt, I learned a great deal from it.
That's interesting how you're able to spin that.
Yeah, and we had discussions about it, beforehand, because we had advisors who said, "No, make sure you don't mention, the bankruptcy," and we didn't, he and I were aligned on that we didn't believe that it was something to hide. Look, it is what it is, right? And And it's not like you can hide it as a secret anyway. It's public information. So it's like
Right.
you look foolish if you make believe it didn't happen, and then someone digs in deeper and says, "Oh, wait a minute, your last business went bankrupt and you didn't mention that." That's even worse, right? So to us, there was no other way to approach it than to be upfront and open about it.
I'm almost thinking that people were shocked, and you're right. They probably, it depends on the person, but they probably looked at you as, oh, first of all, honest, truthful. Yeah, you went through it, but at least the circumstances behind it, you learn.
Yeah.
Like I've had to go through that process too, and you learn a ton by going through a bankruptcy.
Yep.
So Jeff, we're winding down the podcast, and I want to make sure that people get this book. I have the book. I've read it. It's fantastic. How do people get it, and how do people get a hold of you?
Okay. So thank you, Norm. So the book is called, a very short title, Everything I Know About Business and Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger. And the subtitle is One Man's Journey to Hell's Kitchen and Back. So the good news is you don't have to remember that. I actually, and this is kind of a cool domain name tip and hack for you from a marketer's perspective, I actually obviously want you to go to Amazon and buy my book. Now, if you go to Amazon, you could search for the title and you could search for my name if you remember it, but you'll also see other things in the search result. And maybe instead of my book, you'll see the Toxic Avenger movie and decide to rent that or buy that instead of buying my book. So I registered the domain name toxicavenger.marketing. Marketing is another new extension like .club we talked about earlier. And toxicavenger.marketing, it's easy to remember. It's relevant to the title of the book. And that links directly to my books page on Amazon. So if you go to toxicavenger.marketing, you're literally one click away from buying the book. No distracting search results or anything else. So that's a great tip for you in your business if you want to send someone to a particular page within another platform to avoid them searching and getting other results, whether this is Facebook or Amazon or somewhere else. You can register a domain name that's relevant to whatever your business is or your destination is, and then point that. And a lot of companies do that for their Facebook page now. They'll get a domain name and say, go see us on Facebook, go to the domain name. And that way they're not searching for you. They're not going to see other results that are going to distract them. And also you can change where it goes. So in the future, maybe I'm not selling my book anymore on Amazon. Maybe I set up my own storefront and I want to direct people there. I don't have to say now, oh, don't go to Amazon, go here. I just continue to say, go to toxicavenger.marketing, and I can change where it points to. So that's a good hack. So long story short, to get my book, go to www.toxicavenger.marketing. And that'll take you right to the book on Amazon. It's available in Kindle and paperback. You can find me on Twitter at Sass, S-A-S-S. You can go to jeffreysass.com or jeffreysass.club, and that will pretty much link to anything and everything else, more information that you'll ever need to know about me. If you're interested in more about .club, you can go to get.club, www.get.club. If you've got a pet and want an amazing pet bed or other product, go to paw.com, P-A-W.com. And I think between those things, you'll have no trouble finding me.
At least you got some, at least you have one point of contact. That's great, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, thank you for the little nugget at the end.
But it's actually, it's a really good tip.
Yeah, it is. All right, sir. At the end of every podcast, I have one question.
Yep.
And I'm going to pass the torch over to you. Jeff Sass, do you know a guy?
Norm, I know a guy. So the guy I know, and hopefully he won't mind me mentioning him. So his name is C.C. Chapman. And I mentioned at the very beginning that I was a co-host of a dad podcast called Cast the Dads. And CC was one of the other dads on that podcast with me. And CC's actually one of the very early podcasters. He's had podcasts going back as far as 2005. So he's an extremely knowledgeable guy. He teaches digital marketing now at Wheaton University. I hope I got that right, in Boston. And he's just a terrific guy, a lot of knowledge. He's written a great book. And now he'll kill me because I'm having a brain fart and forgetting the name of his book. But he's an author as well. And I think that he would be a great guy for you to talk to.
Fantastic. Well, we will definitely reach out. I appreciate that, Jeff. Oh, hey, by the way, Jeff contacted me just now and he remembers the name of the book.
Norm, it's Jeff Sass again. I know we just finished recording. I know this guy. You're a great podcast. And I feel terrible. At the end there, when I had to tell you I know this guy, I mentioned my friend C.C. Chapman, and I blanked out on the name of his books. And I feel terrible. So I just wanted to make sure you knew. He wrote 2 great books. His first book was Amazing Things Will Happen, which is a wonderful book. And he also is the co-author of Content Rules. And he co-wrote that with Ann Handley. So those are CC's books. I know this guy. You should talk to him. Thanks again for having me on the show. Take care, Norm.
Hey guys and gals, thanks for listening. For more great content, please like, subscribe, and follow I Know This Guy on all social media platforms. I Know This Guy relies on listeners like you. Please visit our Patreon page to find out how you can help.